This video discusses how to construct box plots, specifically for the case when we have outliers in a distribution. So we've been working with these data for a couple of videos now. They're the sparrow lengths for a group of sparrows that either died or survived after a severe storm. So we've gone through how to find the 5-number summary and also decide whether there are outliers in either distribution. And we found one outlier in the group for the group that died, and then a few outliers in the group that survived. So now we're going to go ahead and construct box plots displaying these two distributions. So the first thing that we want to do is just gather one additional piece of information before we start constructing these box plots. And specifically, we want to know the smallest value that isn't an outlier for each distribution and the largest value that isn't an outlier. So for the group that died, we found that there was one lower outlier of 156. So the smallest value that isn't an outlier in this group then is going to be 158. Okay, the maximum for the group that died, the maximum length for the group that died was 166. So since we didn't have any upper outliers, we're just going to leave that at 166. For the group that survived, we had 3 outliers on the lower end. And so we see that the smallest value, which isn't an outlier here, is 155. Okay, for the case, the largest value that isn't an outlier, well, let's go ahead and look at the lower portion of this distribution here, or the upper portion for the greater values. So we have outliers of 165 and 166, and so we have the value that we're looking for. The largest value that isn't an outlier is 163. Okay. So now we're going to use this information to help us construct our box plot. Okay, so I'm just going to put that information on the side of the screen there. Okay. And the first plot that we're going to construct is for the group that died. Okay, so I have one smaller outlier, which is 156 for the group that died. So I can just draw a little asterisk there, or a dot. That's how we're going to denote our outliers. Okay, and then the smallest value that isn't an outlier is 158. So that's going to be where I draw my first line. I'm going to draw 5 different lines here. So the first line is going to go at 158. Then my Q1 is 161. So I'm going to draw a line at 161. My median is 162. I'm going to draw a line at 162. My Q3 is 163.5. So here's 163. 163.5 will be right in the middle there. And then finally, my maximum, okay, which is that isn't an outlier, is 166. Okay, but I didn't have any other. Didn't have an upper outlier, so that's as far as I go. Okay, I connect the 3 central lines. So it's going to represent my Q1, my median, and Q3. That center box represents the central 50% of my data. All right, this represents, the minimum and the maximum less any outliers. So this is still considered the minimum. Okay, and that's my box plot for the group that died. Okay, so we can do the same thing for those that survived. Okay, I'm going to have to just bring this out just a little bit here so that I have some room to see everything. Okay, so for those that survived, we had lower outliers of 153, 154, and 154. So outliers down here. So we had one of 153. And we had 2 at 154. So 154 is right here. So I can just draw 2 right next to each other. I can kind of do that so that you note that there are actually two. So hard to tell if you draw them right on top of each other. Okay, so then we find that the smallest value that isn't an outlier is 155. So we're going to draw a line at 155. Okay, and then we have our Q1 is 158. So I'll draw a line at 158 for Q1. Okay, then my median is 159, so draw a line at 159. My Q3 is 160, so I have my 160 there. And then my largest value that isn't an outlier is 163, so I'll draw a line at 163. Okay, I connect those three center lines. And then I still have two additional points that I have to draw. I have two outliers here of 165 and 166. So let's go ahead and draw those two outliers of 165 and 166. Okay, so here's one, and there's another one. Okay, and that's how we construct a box plot, or side-by-side box plots, when we have outliers in either or both distributions.